In 1937, the Avro company produced designs for the first of its heavy bombers, the twin-engined Manchester. 3 years later, a much improved four-engine development of the aircraft, the now famous Lancaster Heavy Bomber, went into production. After completing the design drawings for the Lancaster in 1941, Avro's designer Roy Chadwick turned to designing a transport aircraft that would take advantage of the Lancaster's long-distance load-carrying capabilities and good handling qualities. To make use of the production lines, the Avro 685 York used the same wing, power plant, undercarriage and tail unit as the Lancaster, but featured a completely new square section, all-metal fuselage with twice the cubic capacity for cargo and passenger carrying. In 1943, priority was given to the production of Lancasters, and only 3 Yorks were built. But in the following year, production rose to 3 a month, and from 1945 to 1948, they were produced in ever larger numbers.
The Lancaster Bomber, the finest heavy bomber in the world, well proved by its many devastating attacks on Berlin and other centers of the Reich, takes its bow in a different form. This great machine now appears as the York Transport. Weighing 30 tons fully loaded, it can transport over 50 people or 10 tons of freight, 2,000 kilometers at better than 400 kilometers an hour.
5 Yorks were used as VIP transport during the war years, carrying many high-ranking officials, including King George VI and Winston Churchill, to conferences and on tours around the world.
The United States, Russia and Great Britain must become cornerstones for a world structure for peace. Yet to secure that peace, decisive victory must be achieved. At these conferences, another vital step was taken, a step which has since resulted in the combined Allied offensive on the German fortress, from both east and west.
As early as 1944, British Overseas Airways Corporation, the government-owned forerunner of British Airways, were operating 5 transport Yorks, with seating for 12 passengers on a route from Britain to Cairo via Morocco. From the end of the Second World War, the York was in constant use by the RAF as both troop transport and cargo aircraft. This cargo variant York was built at Yeadon and was delivered to the Royal Air Force in January 1946. It carried the serial number MW232 and served with 242 and 511 squadrons, making transport flights to the Middle East and Singapore. In 1948, Soviet forces blockaded Berlin in an effort to cut off the city from the west. In a huge airborne operation, Western air forces flew in hundreds of thousands of tons of essential supplies into Berlin. During the airlift, RAF Yorks helped to overcome the blockade by flying 29,000 sorties alongside several civil Yorks operated by Skyways, 2 of which were lost in landing accidents. This York was one that took part in the Berlin Airlift and held the distinction of landing the 100,000th ton of supplies at Berlin's Gatow airfield. In 1949, it suffered tailwheel damage and eventually returned to England in 1950 for refurbishment by Ferry Aviation. On retirement from the RAF, the Yorks went into commercial service on long-distance routes including South America, Singapore and Africa, including a 12-berth sleeper service from London to South Africa. In 1950, BOAC withdrew its Yorks from passenger service, but retained a few as cargo aircraft. The last of these was sold to private airlines in 1957. As the RAF and BOAC Yorks came out of service, they were bought up by several private commercial airlines and were in frequent use on routes throughout Europe, the Middle East, Canada and Africa. In 1954, this York was retired from RAF service and it was sold to Dan Air, who re-registered as G-ANTK. During its career, it flew the equivalent of 99 times around the world, eventually retiring in the early 1960s. By 1963, only 3 Yorks remained operational in Britain. In an age of increasingly quieter aircraft, the York's noise levels, created by its 4 Rolls-Royce engines, became unacceptable. In 1964, the last Yorks retired. This aircraft was preserved by Dan Air, and later in 1986 it was donated to the Duxford Aviation Society. Today, this York is one of only 2 examples left out of the 256 built in Britain between 1942 and 1948. For 20 years, the York was one of the mainstays of long-distance air travel around the world and helped to shape the future of long-haul air travel as we know it today.